this morning of people who can offer us advice on how do we get money. I thought we would have people that can give us this advice on writing those grants, on how to reach out to people, what do they look for in grants. But in order to get the morning started here, I am going to have, get this panel started, I'm going to have our Director of Research and Development, Alyssa coordinate this panel. So, listen.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I hope you all are feeling really rested and excited for day 2. I hope you enjoyed your breakfast. I'm really happy that you're all here. And so on this panel called Funding Arts and Cultural Institutions, we have 3 wonderful people. We have José Calderón from the Hispanic Federation. We have Nereida Andino from Bank of America, and Hazel Colón Vázquez from Titín Foundation. And so we're going to ask questions about how can we get funding, right, from corporate and foundations. And I did want to talk just briefly about my own experience with grant writing, because often when I talk to people about grant writing, the responses that I get are that it seems really hard and it's intimidating, and oh, I could never do that. And I just want to say that I didn't even know what development was 5 years ago, and I was hired at the museum as a researcher for exhibit use. And so my background in writing is more historical research. And so I was asked, like, hey, you want to try out development? And I was like, yeah, what is that? I didn't know. And so I learned quickly about grant writing. And in the beginning, I was also intimidated because I never really thought that I would have a job where I'm writing, because that seems hard, and it ended up being something that I found with the proper resources is doable. And everyone in this room can do it. And so, yes. I think that I was thinking of it more as, oh man, like I'm not a creative writer. I have to be really poetic. My sentences have to be the most beautiful sentences you've ever heard. And in reality, you just need to be to the point, right? If you have a need, which we all do, then the writing should come easy because you just have to state what you need. What are we lacking? What resources do we need, and how can they help us? And so I just wanted to put that out there so that if anyone here is feeling like they're not able to do it, because I know not everyone has a grant writer, and it is a lot of work. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that it's easy. You have to be really organized, and you have to be a little demanding with your staff because it's a team effort. The grant writer puts it all together, but we need help from y'all, right? We need help from the finance people. We need help from the executive director. We need help from the program director so that we are telling a story that makes sense, that is honest, and will help us provide for our communities. And so that's my background. I just would love for each one of you to introduce yourselves, to talk more about your own foundations or Bank of America and what your funding priorities are.
Yeah. Can you hear me? So good morning, José Calderón. I'm the former president of the Hispanic Federation. So I led the Hispanic Federation for 8 years. I'm its senior advisor today. And so the focus of the Federation really is to support organizations like the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture. We were created to serve, to generate resources to support Andino-led, Andino-serving institutions. Initially in New York City, we are in 41 states now, and obviously here in Chicago, we're really excited to be supporting 32 organizations here in the city of Chicago. And the whole focus is to build up organizations' capacity to be able to do the work that they do, right? Programmatically, from a service provision, from an advocacy standpoint. And so, our mission is very simple, right? To support the Latino community, and we do that through Latino community organizations. On an annual basis now, we've grown a lot over the past 5 to 6 years. We're giving out about $20 million to support Latino organizations across the country.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Buenos dias, Nereida Andino, Bank of America. And so I am I'm part of the community affairs team, and basically I'm involved in assessing relationships with national partners and funding these organizations across the country on issues around economic development, community development, housing, hunger, financial literacy, job creation. But as it relates to arts and culture at Bank of America, I think the other piece that's important is that there are two different opportunities. There's the local funding for organizations and that's part of neighborhood revitalization, and then there are national entities. So this support particular to the National Museum for Puerto Rican Arts is part of the national support of arts and heritage. And let me just say the other thing I think is important is that I have a dual history where for many years, I think like Hazel as well, I sat on your end, did fundraising also with organizations like the Hispanic Federation. So very much understand some of the work that you're trying to accomplish.
Hi, buenos días. My name is Hazel Colón, and I serve as the Programs Director for Titín Foundation, which is a small grant-making foundation based in Puerto Rico. And our grants program mainly focuses on arts and culture, you know, from an artist perspective, but also from an access and democratization to the arts and culture, aspect as well. And as Nereida just mentioned, I feel, first of all, incredibly honored and privileged to be here and be sharing this panel with, such great advocates for our communities and for our culture, Puerto Rican culture. So I just wanted to say that. And I've been honored to be allowed to wear many hats over the years as a cultural producer, as a cultural architect, and as a leader of nonprofit organizations. So I understand the challenges and opportunities, and that's the role that I want to assume in this particular role that I'm able to execute right now from a funder's perspective.
Thank you. I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of us, especially as Black and brown institutions, we don't have, right, like billionaires on our board. We don't have that kind of income to rely on. And so we do, although we can't rely solely on grant writing, it is really important for us. And so I'm just, I want to get right into it. For each of you, what are characteristics of a winning grant proposal for your entities?
So this is where sort of rubber hits the road, and I should say, so I mentioned that we're in 41 states, and obviously Puerto Rico as well too, and in fact, over the past 5 years, we've invested $50 million in Puerto Rico, right, to support community groups on the island. For us, I think basic, we're mentioning about the writing piece, and the writing can be intimidating. There is no substitute for good writing, though. Like I think you need to be, you need to have somebody who ultimately sort of drafts and edits the proposal, be a good writer, right? Because that does matter, right? I mean, I can tell you from my end, many times when we receive proposals, and we're the benevolent funder, we exist to support you, right? So we want to fund you. We want to find every reason to support the work that you're doing. But if the writing is poor, right, you have to make some decisions. And what I would tell you, oftentimes what happens is I will read, and our proposals are not very long, it's page, 2 pages, 3 pages. I will read an entire proposal, and at the end of it, I'm like, what are they asking for? So one thing that I would tell you, absolutely, within that first paragraph, tell me what you're asking for, right? Tell me what you're asking for. We need this amount of money to do this, right? And that's critically important. And you also need to know that if the proposal is for diabetes awareness, don't apply for, let's say, climate change, right? So it has to be very specific on what it is that the request for a proposal is focused on. So to me, good writing at the end of the day is, as you were mentioning, very direct, right? Like you're telling us very clearly, like this is what we want, and then you're building the case for it, right? And you're building the case just like anything else. Like as you learn very early on in your literature classes in English or Spanish, that you build a case. So you start here, sort of again with a concise summary of what it is that you're asking for, And then in the middle, you sort of help to build sort of that crescendo, and you help to build the case, and you end it with it again. And this is why you should fund us, right? One of the things that I learned super early on was when I became president of the Federation, was like, oh my God, I don't want to fundraise, right? Okay, that's the last thing I want to do. I was a programs advocacy person, and I was very good at doing that, program development, doing the advocacy work, but I couldn't do any of that work if I wasn't going to be a successful fundraiser. But what I learned is, because I was really good at that work, right, it translated into fundraising, because I was very passionate about the work that we did, and I was very knowledgeable about the work that we did. Actually, one of the first conversations when I became president was with Nereida, and I said, Nereida, I am out of my depth. Like, I feel like we had these incredible fundraisers before as presidents, and it's just not my sort of lane. And then, Nereida said, take deep breaths, right? You're gonna be just fine, and be yourself, right? And so the part of that is, I was very fortunate that I could write, and I could translate the passion that I felt for the work onto paper. And that one, you want to make sure that that comes across, that passion that you feel for the work. You don't have to necessarily write poetic lines, but again, why is it that you should fund me, right? And why is it that my work is so critically important? And all of you, right, are the best advocates, right, to communicate that. And to do that effectively, you have to feel sort of that in your bones. And so I would say that in the writing, that needs to come across. Nereida?
I think the other piece that's really important is, don't assume that the reader knows who you are and what's your community. I can't tell you the number of times, and I know my community, right? But I then have to convince people, like here for this event, I know I know who Oyel is, right? I know who El Museo de Ponce is, but a lot of people that I have to report to don't have a clue. So you should include information about what's your community, data. Give data about your community, the condition of your community. What does that community look like? Create that sense of, what it is that we're talking about. I think the piece that is very important also is that, we always, como bueno puertorriqueño, we always have refrán, right? And it's, ¿cómo se reparte el bacalao, right? And the thing that we always, I never forget is te conozco bacalao. And I think it's real important that you understand who is this entity and what is it that they're interested in. ¿Qué es lo que le interesan? Like José says, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're gonna see something that says arts, we're interested in the arts. Yeah, but what does that mean, right? So I think it's important for you to look at at some of the grants that have been funded before by that institution. What does that look like? What are they interested in? See if there's anything in Google that gives out press releases about their recent grantees. And if you know them, call them up. Tell them, oye, ¿cómo fue que tú pudiste, o sea, con quién tú hablaste? ¿Qué fue lo que tú hiciste? And that is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I subscribe to everything you just said. But yeah, I wanted to add, data is super important for us, and it helps me as a programs director to very communicate and articulate and be an advocate for the organization when I go to the board of directors when I ask for that final approval to actually grant those funds. Also, I love seeing within a proposal a mission or vision project that is aligned to the mission statement of the organization. I don't want, it creates a lot of confusion when you come from a background of arts and culture and then you are asking the foundation for a project of environment and you've never had any experience about that and you don't have any partnerships to actually execute that type of project. So I would say partnerships and collaborations when you want to diversify maybe the type of initiatives or projects that you want to achieve. But data is super important. Having a clear statement or a thesis statement about the project that you actually want to get funded within that first paragraph, as José Calderón mentioned, and that executive summary, we wanted to see that. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
If I wanted to add one piece, because both of you have said it so eloquently, that language matters, so the language that you write, right? Because there are different languages. The way you speak to you know, let's say people in community is different from the conversation you may have with family members, etc. And so I think that you have to understand the language of that institution that's doing the grant making, right? So when we connect with the Ford Foundation, as an example, they have a whole different kind of language as opposed to, again, connecting with Bank of America, for instance, right? There is just different language that they use. So what part of sort of the language that they're using can you use to be effective in what you're writing, right? Your mission, the piece about mission is so critically important. What part of my mission connects to their work? What part of my mission connects to what they're ultimately trying to achieve, right? And that is really important, that you never lose sight of that, right? And to sort of the final piece, reread everything you write many times over. Like you know, and I'm sure you learned this in school, like you just don't write something and, you know, you hand this over to the professor, right? Like you should read it, put it down, come back to it multiple times, and have other people read it, have other eyes on it, to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward when it comes to, you know, a proposal.
Yeah, and I would also love to add, before you submit your grant, for me it's very important to maybe have a first communication with the program officer or someone within that foundation who you could ask questions if you have any doubts, who could maybe understand or give you any further information or technical assistance about what is it that, you know, this funder is looking for. Having that first interaction sometimes makes a huge difference.
And I think one other last point related to that, again, in research, do your homework, know your audience. How much are you asking for, right? And I think if you go in and you ask for $100,000, and the average that they give in that particular community is $25,000, you've shot yourself in the foot, because they're not even going to look at it. They're like, you have no clue. So do some research. You know, make sure. Conoce el bacalao, because otherwise you're just doing yourself a disservice. So.
Yeah, to go off of that, I definitely agree. It's really important for you to get to know who the funder is, because as Jose was talking about language, who that person is going to inform your writing. So if I'm applying to a grant to a funder that focuses a lot on architectural buildings and programming in that sense, I'm going to talk more about the history of this building. But if I'm applying to someone who wants to support senior citizen programs, I'm not going to go into how in 1895 this building was built as the horse stables. Like, I'm not going to add all of that extra fluff because it's not needed. And so, and also, if you apply for a grant and you don't get it, don't be afraid to reach out to these funders, because not everybody gives you feedback, but a lot of them do. And the feedback they give you is so helpful. I've actually been really surprised at how much time people are willing to spend with me to go over my application, to go over what points I missed and where I could have improved. So getting to know your funder before and maintaining that relationship after is really important. And so my next question is, you know, what are some common mistakes that you see that you wish people would stop doing when it comes to grant writing?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we see is that they're not specific, right? If I'm asking you, there's a reason why there are 3 questions in that proposal. I need to know what are those 3. If I'm asking 3 things, respond to those 3. Ask someone else, did I answer this question? That this, you know, just have someone else look at it, you know, and see, did you answer? Because if you didn't, again, like, why are you not answering my question? It's a very simple question. So I think you have to be specific, again, about the information that we're asking. And as both of my colleagues have said, that the aim, that you are connecting the aim, because I can't tell you, we see so many, I'm like, you know, this has nothing to do with what we're doing here. So again, you just have to be anal about being specific and answering the questions that are being asked.
This may sound super basic, but when you have a project and you're, you know, seeking those funds to actually execute that initiative or project, you might be reaching out to different funders with the same project, please do not copy and paste the text. I see a lot of, we receive a lot of proposals that are not actually targeted to us. They were intended to be directed to other funders, and maybe, you know, they were from another year, last year, past year, and they did not change the data, they did not change the dates, and that does not resonate, and, you know, you automatically feel like that's something that you don't want to look at. So yeah, that would be, it may seem basic, but I know sometimes we wear many hats and we're very busy doing a lot of stuff. So yeah, and also I wanted to add that have that grant writer work side by side with your programs director or your program manager, because the grant writer can actually do the writing, but they're not able to maybe understand or design that project or that vision. So I see a lot of mistakes when the organization just gives the grant writer the task to actually design the project and react to an open call or an RFP. And instead, I think we should be looking at RFPs that are aligned with our mission and vision.
Yeah, and so I think we're reiterating a lot of what we have said before, but you have to be clear, right, and to the point. That first paragraph needs to tell whoever the reader is on the other side what it is that you're asking for, and why it is that you're also really good at doing what you're asking for, right, at the end of the day. I think that's the piece. And so we talk about sort of what's the impact that you're going to have if you receive this funding. That also needs to be very clear. Sometimes, you know, they'll say we want this amount of money, right? And yes, we want it for this. Okay, check, okay. And then, like, I read the whole thing, it's like, but what are you going to do, right? What's the impact? You know, what, you know, if I give you these, whatever, $20,000, you know, what's going to come out of that, right? What good will be served by us giving you that money? And so I think you're always looking for your value proposition. What's my value proposition here at the museum? Well, we are the only museum, right, in the United States that brings together the, you know, Puerto Rican arts and culture in the diaspora, right? And we do X, Y, and Z, right? So go on, I'm sure Billy can say this much more effectively, or certainly you can say it much more effectively than I can. But what's your value proposition? Why are you unique, right? Why out of the 100, you know, proposals that I got, where I can only fund 3, should I fund you, right? And I think that you should always be thinking about that. I would always tell our development staff, you know, again, are you communicating what our value proposition, why we are unique as an organization, right? And why we are different, and why you should fund us at the end of the day. So that's important to keep in mind.
So I think most of us are more familiar with applying to foundations than corporate entities. So my next question is for Nereida. How can Puerto Rican arts and cultural institutions best position themselves for grant funding or sponsorships from corporate entities?
So, I think 2 things. One is networking, right? One of the most important things is for you to understand who sits there, who cares, who is the person that is reviewing these proposals, and do I know anybody that's part of that board, right? And you might go to a party, and you might go to an event, or you might be here, and someone that I know someone, don't be, you know, many of us are accused of being too humilde, right? Que no me atrevo, que van a decir, bendito sea. You're not asking for Nereida, you're not asking for José, you're not asking for Alyssa, you're asking for the Puerto Rican people. So I think the most important thing is that you must be tenacious, right? El que no llora, no mama. So, and I grew up in a house con refranes. So yesterday con Ivaliz, she was all over. I was like, oh my God. And it's not, you know, it's not just us. Pero mira, mami y papi tenían razón. You know, there's something to be said about these things. And that's tenacity. And so I think that when you look at what is it that, in terms of sponsorships, what was the last thing that, you know, Bank of America or the Federation or Titín Foundation is focused on? Are they more interested in dinners? Or are they more interested, and again, you do this by looking them up on Google. You know, look up what was their last event. Who's their CEO? Look up that name. Why were they honored? Why were they honored? Eh? And then you write that individual a letter. I can't tell you the number of times that I get an email from the secretary to the CEO of Bank of America Global, Brian Moynihan, because somebody, you know, Mike Nieves wrote to Brian Moynihan and wants to know, why are we not giving money to this organization? And it comes down. And I got to respond back to the big boss. So do it. You have nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. And so how does sponsorship differ from programmatic? Again, understand the organization and the entity. What that means is that we have two separate budgets, right? We have a budget for programmatic issues, programmatic opportunities where you're going to bring in individuals, you're going to, you know, have the seniors come in and have an intergenerational, or you're going to train young men and women to be docents, right? Job training. That is programmatic. The event is the event. And this, you know, it's an event that you maybe the bank can just, one last point I want to make about this, the bank may, or the corporation may just be interested in these events, and it may only be 5,000 or 10,000, but it's a foot in the door. And the other thing I want to say that's very important with corporations is don't underestimate volunteerism. Because the minute somebody volunteers, búscate quien sea que tú conozcas que works at whatever corporation, and I don't care what it is. It could be Walmart, it could be Chase, it could be Banco Popular or Citi. Because anywhere, if they volunteer, they become champions and advocates for you. And they then can call someone that sits where I sit or sits where someone else sits and has the opportunity then to say, by the way, you know, I'm volunteering, I'm providing, you know, financial literacy, or I'm doing this event for, you know, I'm helping, you know, put up the paperwork or lo que sea for Museo, you know, de Ponce. That means something, because the more people are supporting what I want to do, that gives me cover, right? And so I can say, bueno, you know, Julie Chavez cares about this. This is really important that Julie Chavez that sits in Chicago is interested in this. So try to get as many volunteers as possible from corporations, and in some corporations, they only give to those organizations that their employees volunteer in. And they also have sort of affinity-focused organizations like HOLA, which is Hispanic Organization for Latino Advancement or something. That's the employee-based organization. And some corporations only give to those entities that are involved. So, you know, do your homework.
So let me add, because we get a lot of support from the private sector, right? From corporations, just the private sector in general. And one of the things that I always tell our executive directors, you cannot, when it comes to corporate fundraising, you cannot do it from your office. Like, you need to get outside of your office. You will never be successful sitting there and looking up, okay, what does Bank of America do, right? Oh, okay, they support this. Let me send them a letter of inquiry, right? It will never happen, right? People fund people. Like, so you need to be able to understand that, again, at the end of the day, they need to know you. They need to know you by face. They need to know you by who you are, right? Your personality. They need to like you, right? At the end of the day, sort of, again, and you've heard this before, if you who are doing development, like, people fund other people. And so you need to find who your advocates are. Find your Nereidas. And they're very rare, by the way, because Nereida is, you know, sort of this exceptional person that's so deeply connected to the nonprofit sector, and particularly Latino nonprofit sector, and particularly the Puerto Rican nonprofit sector. And so find the Nereidas where they exist, right? And those rare jewels, right, in there, connect with them and figure out, again, how is it that I can sort of open the door, even a little bit, right, into this corporation, et cetera. Again, you need to leave the office to do that. Sometimes you need to leave community to do that, or you need to be able to figure out where they're at and meet them there, get them to know you, right, and like you, right? And I think that won't ever be an issue with anybody in this room, right? But that's important, because at the end of the day, you know, they can fund, you know, thousands of other organizations. The difference is going to be like, hey, I connected with you, and I remember her, and I really like what she said, right? And that resonated with me, and I'm interested, and I want to hear more.
Okay, I want to open up to the floor, but I do want to ask one more question. I think it's really important, especially for this group. This is more for Hazel. How can organizations in the diaspora connect to foundations in Puerto Rico?
That's actually a great question, and hopefully you were able to be, participate from our last panel yesterday, where we talked a little bit about Sin Fines PR and that specific tool to, promote connection and collaboration within the nonprofit organizations in Puerto Rico, but also now we want to extend that to nonprofit organizations specifically based in the Puerto Rican diaspora. So that is that's a start. You can browse that platform and try to connect all the information of these nonprofit organizations is there. They have their own profile, a description, their social media accounts, and the type of funding they're able to receive as well. As a private, small grant-making foundation based in Puerto Rico, we don't actually fund any initiatives based in the United States, but we are able to do that through partnerships, through collaboration between nonprofit organizations in Puerto Rico and in the United States. We were able to do so with the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture in order to bring the symphony orchestra here to Chicago last month, and we were able to do that through a partnership with the symphony orchestra. So we were able to fund them to bring them here and actually make that happen for that vision that Billy had since years ago. But I encourage you to reach out to nonprofit organizations in Puerto Rico and make those connections, and then we would be able to fund those specific partnerships.
Great, thank you all so much. We're going to open it to questions to anyone in the audience, so raise your hand if you have. All right, I saw Mike Nieves first, so we're going to go over there.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I just want to share a little experience. They said something that was very important, right? Have other people review what you are submitting. But it's like in sports. You have to play with someone better than you to become better. So when you're looking for somebody, don't look for someone in your staff that you're going to share it with. Look for someone outside, someone who's been more successful at getting proposals. So you write your proposal for Robin Hood Foundation. You reach out to the Hispanic Federation and ask someone there to look at it to see that you're doing it. Because what you do, if you do it internally, you're not going to grow. You need to step out, right? And that's very important. I served in the city council for a long time. I reviewed tens of thousands of proposals in my career. But when Lorraine was at Hispanic Federation and we were giving out money, she made it her business to come over to me and say, Mike, this is what we're doing. How do you think this member's going to do it? How do you think the speaker's going to do it? What do you think there? Did we hit the note here? That's important. Why do you come to me? Because I'm one of the guys who are going to sign off on it, right? And I've done it. So if you keep it amongst yourselves, it's not good. So what does that mean? That means that you should be looking out already for groups and other people that you can partner with, that you can be mentored by early on, so that you can say, I could feel comfortable calling a Mike Nieves. Thanks for the shout out. Now 50 people are going to call me to say, Mike, how does this look? And right now I am actually reviewing a proposal for someone who's applying for some money with the Robin Hood Foundation. So that's important, right? Just don't keep it amongst yourselves. Tap the people you meet. And when you come out here networking, that's what you need to do. You need to say, listen, Mike, can I have your card? And I'll tell you, see Alejandro, talk to Alejandro, and Alejandro will do all the work for you. All right? Thanks.
And let me just say, Mike, that some foundations, if you ask them and they say, can I send you a draft of my application or proposal? Would you be willing to do that? Some will say, absolutely not. That's giving an upper hand to someone else, and that's not acceptable. Nereida Andino says, sure, I'll take a look at it. Why not? So, no pierdes nada preguntando ni pidiendo, como dicen, que no llora, no mama.
Jose, I have a question. When you go to corporations asking for money, do you guys write grants, or how do you get the money from the corporations?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you have to write, right? You have to put pen to paper at the end of the day. But I can tell you, at the Federation, we've grown to now be a $50 million organization. And I would tell you, we have a very small development team, right? Raisha, you can attest to this. We have a very small team. And the reason that we've been able to keep ourselves lean is because we don't apply for anything that is sort of pie in the sky. We don't apply for anything that we're pretty sure that we have a really good chance of getting. And we're pretty sure we have a good chance of getting because we know someone there and we've had significant conversations. Like, we've had real deep conversations about sort of what our vision is for this work and why it's important, and then we've gotten receptivity from the other end to say, wow, that's great, that's fascinating, you guys should definitely apply, right? So unless we get that, it's just you don't have the time. So to send co-proposals, it's a very hard thing to do, right? In the foundation world, for sure, and certainly in the corporate world, the same. So I would tell you that there is no substitute for relationship building. Like, you have to be able to do that, and you have to do it well, and then you're right? We have tried the other approach where just send the proposals. And that's going to be 90% of the times it's just going to be rejected. So think about the time that you spent doing that, right? As opposed to building relationships where you have a much greater chance. And I would tell you, most of the proposals we submit get funded. Most of them, in the high 80s, or whatever have you. But we have worked at it, right? We have worked really hard at getting to that point.
Hi, my name is Omar Torres Cortright. I'm the director of the Segundo Ruiz Belvis Cultural Center here in Chicago. And there's a lot of new trends in philanthropy that you could say are somewhat new. And one of them is, historically, a lot of the funders are looking at the budget of the organization, and that number is directly related to what you're willing to give to that organization. And I was wondering if there's been developments in that, and whether your approach has changed, because for the most part, the majority of foundations are very much guided by that number of the budget of the organization. And then the other thing, for the Hispanic Federation, is funding 32 organizations here in Chicago. What is is it by invitation, or is there a call for proposals? What are, and I know that's information is probably on the website or whatever, but since I'm here, I was curious. Thank you.
Yeah. So let me just take the first part. And so the question is, if you have a budget of $250,000, we're only going to give you X, right? We're not going to give you more. So that works both ways. One, there's some funds, and we're part of it. I sit on a committee where, because we know that some funds and some entities will only fund organizations with less than 250 because it's about capacity building. So you need to do a little bit of research and see that. But part of it is, and this is a tough call, is we want to make sure you can manage the money. Because, you have a $250,000 budget and you're asking for 100, that's just more, almost half of your budget, total budget. Why should I give that and put that in there? That's a risk that I'm taking. So, it's highly unlikely that you'll get more than 25,000. Maybe 50. And again, that's because they need to make sure that you can manage it. What I would say to you is how you grow is through government contracts. And we were talking this morning about that. Because your city council member might be willing to stick out the neck and say, this is important and we need to give them a $250,000 grant or $100,000 grant where I can't justify that. But, the alderman might be able to do that because it's important for him and for the other elected officials. So no philanthropic dollar compares with government dollars. So if you want to grow, go after government dollars. And then we help you with the programmatic development, conceptual development. But it's the government dollars that's going to allow the organization to grow.
Hazel, you want to know? Yes, sir. Okay. So, I'll tell you a story that, we were working with the Ford Foundation for a long time, and we couldn't get in the door. Like, it was like impossible. It's like this ivory tower, and it was just like, you know, Dios mío, like, what do we have to do to get funding from the Ford Foundation? And at that point, they had, you know, brought in a Puerto Rican president, right, for the first time in its history. And I got to know his name is Luis, and he, you know, I've shared the story in public with him, so I'm sure he doesn't mind. So I got to know Luis, you know, for months, right? And he finally said, Jose, come by. So I go by, and, you know, I say, look, we want to do X, Y, and Z. And he agrees, okay, you know, that's right in line with what we're doing. What do you want, right? And I said, and at that point, we were a $4 million organization. And I said, hey, I have the president of the Ford Foundation asking me what I want, right? Like, you know, I was $4 million. I want to double my budget, right? But I didn't have the guts to say that. So I said $1 million, right? But that's still 25% of my budget. And he said to me, right, the first thing he said, isn't your budget $4 million? I said, yes, it is. He said, I can't do it. I can't give you, you know, 25% of your annual budget. So it's absolutely true what you're saying, right? So there is that piece, and what Nereida is saying, I think is really important, because look at the work that Billy has been able to do with the National Puerto Rican Museum, right? So much of this, right? When we think about the space that we're building now, right, right across here in the lawn, right? That's government money that, you know, Billy was able to fight for and hustle and bring into the community. So that's one quick way of growing, because you have to understand, when you go to foundations and corporations, they're going to look at that formula, right? You know, we're just not going to give you such a significant part of your budget where you are at a certain place. But again, it doesn't mean that you don't try, but you have to know the limits. What are they funding for organizations that look like ours, right? That's the limit. And as far as the Federation, right now, it's sort of an open call. That's the good news if you're in Chicago here, right? We've funded many of you that are here, and oftentimes it may just be me giving you a call, right? To just kind of say, hey, let's talk. Now, and again, we're very different because we exist to support Latino-led organizations. Now, we can't support every Latino organization, obviously, but you know, we're going to try to find a way to help you. So we should talk after this panel discussion, and we're you know, right now looking for organizations to support in Chicago. So.
Yeah, I mean, from Titín Foundation specific perspective, of working with non-representations in Puerto Rico. Can you hear me? No? So from Titín Foundation's specific perspective and working with non-profit organizations in Puerto Rico, we are aware of the influx of federal funds that are, you know, arriving to Puerto Rico. So we understand the specific need for us to help these organizations strengthen their operational capacity to actually be able to manage those funds. So we start with small grants, maybe 25, 30,000 grants, sometimes even more. It depends on the type of partnerships, as I was mentioning before, that you're able to make. But we are, you know, very aware of the necessity of diversifying the type of funds that you're able to attract to your organization, and how can we help you better prepare to actually access that bracket.
So one other piece, and I was just asking Nereida if I could share our experience with Bank of America. And so we started with Bank of America with like a $10,000 grant, right? And Nereida, you know, helped us push it to 25,000. And, you know, we were kind of at that level for a period of time. And then, you know, it's sort of going back, and Nereida, can we push it to 75? And that took a while, and you know, it was difficult. And now you're talking about, you know, well above that number, right? But it took a while to build a relationship internally. Now with Nereida, because we had found our advocate, and again, to go back to the piece, find your advocate within these institutions. But Nereida has a whole structure that she has to convince, right? So how do we get to that point? And it was really working with, again, that advocate inside the organization, inside the funding organization, to get us to different levels. And it's relationship building. And then it's part of it when Nereida said, well, you need to meet other people at the bank, right? You need to meet, you know, you need to meet the COO. You need to meet with whatever have you. You need to come when we have. And she opened those doors eventually. So she had to be less of an advocate because they knew us then, right? So it all goes back to the relationship building piece.
I'm going to take one more question, but for anyone else that has questions that didn't get to ask, I encourage you to definitely find us, throughout the day, even at the gala. We definitely want to continue this conversation. I think, Arocho, you had a question?
Yeah, very quickly, this is for mainly Nereida, but for everybody, how much of a ivory tower is Bank of America now in terms of actually giving funds to Puerto Rican and Latino organizations? And in terms of other banks, what do you think, the reality odds are?
Listen, I knew that question was coming, right? And I'm going to be very honest, and anybody that knows me knows I'm very honest and very transparent. And we were talking about this, Hazel and Jose and I. It's a challenge. We're not getting enough of our share. We're just not, across the board, right? Mike knows this. This has been, when we founded the Hispanic Federation back in the 80s, I was part of that. We literally...
Not Bank of America, but...
No, I was part of United Way. I worked at United Way, and my task was to create a federation for Hispanics. And the reason why we did that was because back then, we did an analysis of Puerto Rican leadership in New York City and found that 1 to 3% of all government dollars and philanthropic dollars, corporate and foundation, only 1 to 3% went to Latino Puerto Rican organizations in the city of New York. That was horrific. And they said that was because there was no organization advocating for Latino organizations. So the Puerto Rican leadership that sat on the board of the United Way went to leadership and said, we need to create something so that we could sit at the table with the blacks and the Jews and anybody else that cuando se está repartiendo el bacalao, because we're not at the table. And so I tell you that that was the impetus in creating the federation, to then give back out to Puerto Rican and Latino-led organizations, and not serving just Hispanic organizations, but those that are led. So you have to be 2 out of 3. You have to either be a Hispanic executive director, a Hispanic board, 51% Hispanic, and serve 51% Hispanic clientele. I'm telling you all this because, unfortunately, to this day, the numbers are not that much better. They're better in New York. We've got this fantastic organization that's 50 million, right? We didn't have that. We had a $150,000 grant from United Way 30 years ago. But we're doing, those of us that sit up here, that's our role, is to try, and we look to you to help us to get there. So when Jose came to me and said, and again, I'm going to be very honest with you, and I said that this morning, when Jose came to me and said, Nereida, can Bank of America support the nostalgia de mi isla? I was like, I started to cry when I saw this. This is beautiful. This is great. Pero ¿qué pasa? When I went to the people at the Bank of America, they were like, we're not familiar with any of those individuals. These are the people that head our global arts and heritage. I said, no problem, we got this. I called Jose and I said, I need an overview of who are these people, how important they are. Campeche, from the court, from the 1700s, they were like, we had no idea. So it's a challenge, and we have a lot of work to do, but we can do it. And we need those of you out here to, I'm serious, write the letters to the CEOs, write the letters to, as for where I sit, your advocacy makes my job easier. People sit where I sit hate advocates. Oh, Dios mío, they're always a pain in the ass. They're always complaining, que si eso. I'm like, well, I got a job because you complained. What was that? I'm sorry? Exacto. I'm telling you, mommy and papi were right. Mira, el que no llora, no mama. Te conozco bacalao aunque venga disfrazado. Y la que tiene madrina se bautiza. That's networking, know your audience, and tenacity. We call it jodona, pero I told my mother, it's tenacity, it's tenacity. So, anyway.
So, thank you, Nereida. That's so important. And you're not going to hear that. I mean, this is Nereida, right? And you're not going to hear that from a lot of people who work, obviously, in philanthropy generally. What you need to know is that Latino-led institutions in this country, receive less than 1% of all the philanthropic money that goes out. Less than 1%. So you know that we are dealing with a system that is inherently discriminatory, right? Inherently unequal. That is the fact of today. Now, that doesn't mean that we give up. It doesn't mean that change can't happen, but that's the reality that we face. As Latino organizations, as Puerto Rican organizations, that is the reality you're going to face. There are structural, mechanisms in place that are preventing our community from getting funded. And yet, right, you have examples all around. I mean, I think the National Puerto Rican Museum is a good example of that, right? We're breaking doors, and one of the things that Billy said to me is like, look, the Chicago Community Trust, they're not funding us. And I say, well, us as a funder, we're going to go to the Chicago Community Trust and say, match us here. Like, this is a really important institution, and you have to support us here, right? Because we're going to put money on the table, but we also need you to put money on the table as well, too. So change is possible in whatever approach that you sort of go at it, but something that Jose Lopez said yesterday, and Billy has said multiple times, and Nereida has said, Hazel has said, we have to be persistent. Like, and we are a people that have, again, just by the mere existence that, we are Puerto Rican Latino, is the fact that we've had to hustle our entire lives. That we've had to fight for whatever little resources that we're able to get. And we understand that we have to be resilient, and we have to be persistent, and we have to be tenacious, because no one's going to be coming knocking on our door to give us this, right? And we're always fighting to sort of break down those doors, but we can do it, right? And we can do it by being incredible advocates, by finding the advocate inside the organizations we're trying to break through the doors, and by working collaboratively, right? Because it's Billy reaching out to us to say, hey, I want to do this. I want to build a national museum for Puerto Rican arts and culture right here in Chicago. But we need your help to do that. And by the way, once we've built it, we're really going to need your help, right? So that is the creating the bridges, creating the advocacy, creating the coalitions that we need to be effective. So everything is possible.
I just want to thank you all so much for sharing your expertise. I know this was an anticipated panel, and like I said, we will continue this conversation. Before I close, I do want to offer you some resources, some tangible resources that really have helped me as a new, even though it's been 4 years, I still, every time, I applied to so many grants, and every time I still reference these materials. And so right here I have Perfect Phrases for Writing Grant Proposals by Dr. Beverly Browning. It's a $13 book. Like I said, it gives you a lot of examples on the language. We talked about writing, and to this day, I have to think about like, okay, this is a different foundation. How do I word what I want to say to where they'll listen, where they'll really comprehend? So this affordable book is really awesome. There's also pdfdrive.com. If you're not familiar with this website, get familiar. So it offers free downloads of books. So it's pdfdrive.com. And so you can find books of all different types of topics, but I imagine there will be grant writing materials on there. And one in particular is called Winning Grants Step by Step, the complete workbook for planning, developing, and writing successful proposals. You can definitely talk to me about this today. And that's a free download as well. And these books break it down to the different sections, measurement, program, outcomes, goals, all that sort of stuff. So I hope that is helpful to you all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.